When it comes to advocacy and the kinds of things that they need to be thinking about, what kinds of things from an advocate perspective does a family member need to be thinking about when their loved one is getting ready to go into the hospital for some kind of a surgery, whether it's ambulatory or staying for a couple of days?
Put hospitals in two buckets, expected and unexpected, because those are two very different experiences, right? An expected surgery, you've met the surgeon, you've talked about it, you've set a date, you've packed a bag, you know what you're there for. And then there's unexpected. So one of the things I hear oftentimes people say, like, well, I didn't expect it to be that painful, right? Ask ahead of time. What do you think the pain is going to be, and what do I need to do to be aware of my limitations after the surgery, right? Because every surgery is very different.
Hi, I'm Glennis Woods Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe. One of the things that we don't talk a lot about, but we probably should, is what happens with us if we do, God forbid, have to be admitted to a hospital. What process do we go through? What kinds of things should we look for? What kinds of questions should we be asking? And also, of course, one of the reasons why I'm here is trying to figure out ways to avoid having to be in the hospital, but sometimes it can't be avoided. Sometimes things happen and we need to get them addressed. And that's why I'm so excited to have with us today our guest, Dr. Monique Nugent. She has written a book that's really kind of fascinating, very niche in terms of the things that you need to be looking for when you are admitted to a hospital. And even the name of the book is Prescriptions for Admissions, really does address all the kinds of concerns that we probably don't think about as lay people that we need to know to advocate. Because, I'm all about advocating for ourselves and being prepared and educating ourselves so that we can kind of know what to expect and what to do. So first of all, Dr. Nugent, welcome to the Vibe Living Podcast. It's wonderful having you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for sharing your audience with me.
Absolutely. So first of all, tell us a little bit about your background and what made you decide to write a book like this.
Yeah, so I am a hospitalist. I'm a board certified internist who only practices in the hospital. I only see patients, adults who are acutely hospitalized. That's really where I have focused my career, and it is my love of medicine. I find that hospitals, it's a big black box to a lot of people, including to a lot of physicians. Like when their patients go in the hospital, what happens in the hospital kind of is really separate from the world. But hospitals really are kind of very unique in where they live in healthcare, right? Most people think of them as really just this rescue place, right? But there's so much more than that. There's places where people expand their families, right? There are places also where people are supported when someone is passing away, places people go for chronic illnesses, right? And they've become this big social safety net, right? So the only thing open 24 hours a day other than like a Waffle House, right, is the hospital. And really, it's where people go when they need help. And I love hospital-based medicine. And that's why I've chosen to really build my career there. I was a hospitalist practicing when COVID hit, which meant that when everybody else kind of got to reshape what working looked like, I didn't. I had to go into work, and I was working in a very different environment, not just when people think about, all of the precautions we had for the infectious disease that we were dealing with, but it really changed the landscape on how we interacted with patients and their family members, right? Because as a hospitalist, I depend on family members often to be at the bedside throughout the day, for phone calls, for family meetings, to be partners in somebody's healthcare. And suddenly we were all cut off, right? And it wasn't this great experience. I think people maybe thought, oh, they loved being cut off from the public, but it was not the case at all because it becomes extremely difficult to care for people in this very isolated, silo type of environment. And I was also the associate director of my group at the time. So I'm helping these physicians navigate the landscape, both the infectious and medical landscape. So we're having meetings all the time. It's like what medications are coming out, what's the new data, what we should be using, should we be doing steroids and for how long? But then also helping them to navigate that same communication issues, right? They're also really struggling with that because when I see 14 patients a day in the hospital, if 7 of their loved ones are at the bedside, that's 7 family meetings that I have kind of through the day.
Wow.
Suddenly, we now have to call everybody. And
Mm.
and phone calls are not as easy and as to get across the information both for us and family members, right?
Wow.
Because I can say to you, like, is this what mom normally looks like? And people's no, no, this is a lot more confused, or no, this is kind of mom's baseline versus I'm meeting your mom. I think she's confused. Tell me what she looks like usually, right?
Yeah.
And so it made things very difficult for people to navigate healthcare, which is thoroughly difficult to navigate in general.
It's interesting because, of course, COVID just really exacerbated some of the disconnects that we have in our hospital system.
Hmm.
We talked about earlier. I worked in a hospital for almost 6 or 7 years. I was in charge of nurse recruitment, and my office and my team were housed in a hospital, even though
Hmm.
we were responsible for 13 hospitals and clinics within a geographic area. We were housed there at a hospital, and it really is like a community. You can get everything you need in a hospital except for maybe gas, but anything things like, food, you can buy a gift,
Yeah.
there's a lot there. And when COVID came, I was no longer working in the hospital environment by that time. I was running my own business, but I still had a lot of friends who were still working in the hospital environment. When COVID came, that's one of the first things they talked about was how cut off they were from
Hmm.
everybody else that normally is involved in the patient's care. And it had never occurred to me that that would even be a thing or an issue. And I think one of the things that it really honed in on, and talking to you even more so, is the importance of advocacy from
Hmm.
your family when you're ill, and not just coming from you because you're ill. So, when it comes to advocacy and the kinds of things that they need to be thinking about, what kinds of things from an advocate perspective does a family member need to be thinking about when their loved one is getting ready to go into the hospital for some kind of a surgery, whether it's ambulatory or staying for a couple of days?
Yeah. So I like to put hospitals in 2 buckets, expected and unexpected, because those are 2 very different experiences, right? An expected surgery, you've met the surgeon, you've talked about it, you've set a date, you've packed a bag, you know what you're there for. And then there's unexpected, you weren't feeling well at work and you go in and they say it's your appendix, right? 2 very different experiences. You're getting the physician who's on call and the team that's there versus your handpicked team. If you are in the situation where you have the opportunity, right? You're going in for a joint replacement or an ambulatory surgery in some way that you have picked this team, you have had experience with them before. What I would say is get as much information as you can beforehand in the office, right? And be really specific about it. Don't feel like you're asking any kind of embarrassing question or any kind of question that is silly. You would be surprised at the things people may not think about, right? So, um, one of the things I hear oftentimes people say, like, well, I didn't expect it to be that painful, right? Ask ahead of time. What do you think the pain is going to be? And what do I need to do to be aware of my limitations after the surgery, right? Because every surgery is very different. If you're going in for a joint replacement, they may want you up and moving, right?
Mhm.
They may you going in for cabbage, valves, I'm sorry, vessels, a multi-vessel replacement on your heart. And they get those guys up, right? You have your surgery, they want you up, they want you moving. That But if you're going in for like a hemorrhoid surgery, right, that's going to be really painful to have your next bowel movement. You may
Mhm.
go in for the pain of the hemorrhoid, not expecting that surgically you're going to have some pain after that as well, right? So, like, ask all of your questions about pain, downtime, preparation, who can be there with you afterwards, what you may need to be in your home safely after that. Does this change my ability, right? Will I need a walker? Will I
Mhm.
need a bedside commode for a little bit? And what does the follow-up and rehab look like, right?
Those
Um,
are all great questions and things that normally people may not think about all at one time. I have another question for you because I know this happens on the floor because I used to see it happening. And that's when there is, for whatever reason, a disconnect between the physician and the
mhm.
family member or even the patient. What is appropriate for the patient or the family member to do to try to advocate and get their points across? And what kind of help can they get in a situation like that?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is the fact that like healthcare is built in layers, right? Somebody is always kind of reporting to another person, right? And so always kind of address things as they're happening. Because when you have to go back, and part of my old job as the associate director was I did a lot of investigation
Mhm.
when people had concerns. So people would file a formal complaint about something that happened 2, 3 weeks ago. For
Mhm.
me to go back and investigate that, um, it doesn't help that you were uncomfortable, you felt unheard, you maybe felt unsafe in that moment. That moment is past, right?
Mhm.
And now I'm trying to unpack it. So I really encourage people to try and address things as they're happening to the person they're happening closest to, right? And so let's say you and the physician just like aren't seeing eye to eye on something, right?
Mhm.
Doc, I hear what you're saying. Here is my concern, and this comes from a pediatrician who gives advice to parents for how to navigate these type of situations. She says, "Say the worst thing. Say it. I am concerned that you are leaving me in a ton of pain. Say the
Mhm.
say the worst thing. Like
Yeah,
put it out there." And by that I don't mean, being rude or something but no, just advocate and
yeah,
say like,
right. That's a very good point, doctor, that you bring up because I just recently had quite a bit of interactions with doctors. I have a grandson with spina bifida, and thankfully he's doing really well. But in the process of going through his development, there have been times when we've had to go to ED because we're not quite sure what's happening. And there have been several times where the doctors are like saying one thing, and my daughter's saying, yes, but this is what's happening. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes you have to go from 0 to 10 to get them to pay attention to what you're talking about. And it could go from 0 to 10 if they, because what happened with us is, grandson was released and we were right back there 5 hours later. Grandson was released. We were right back there a day later. So finally we were like, this is ridiculous. And we're not leaving
mhm,
until we find out why there's this pain or what this scream is all about. Because saying that is just it's for no reason or it's developmental doesn't quite resonate with us because we know our child. And I think sometimes people have a level of uncomfortability questioning a doctor because you are so well trained and so well qualified, so well educated. And those who may have a different kind of experience when it comes to being educated and prepared feel intimidated to say
mhm.
things. What do you have to say to people like that? They feel a little intimidated about talking to their doctor or explaining their concerns.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of older folks kind of on the other spectrum, right? And the older generations tend to have a little bit of that. You say like, okay, doctor, whatever, like deference feeling, but also the world moves fast, right? I come in, I'm saying all sorts of things. I have like 10,000 computers, then there's other people, like, and it is an intimidating thing. And a lot of times things don't get said until their adult children show up and they may have something to, oh, well, my mom actually meant this or that. Um, Again, I always say like it may feel like there is a dumb question, but there is no dumb question. And even if somebody gives you that was kind of a dumb question reaction, right? You still got your thing answered,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
You are still in a better position knowledge wise than you were however long ago, right? And You may never see that physician again. You may never have to interact with that nurse again. Maybe that nurse's shift is over in the next 3 hours and you'll never see him again. Who knows? But you still are living with whatever you're experiencing, right? So ask the question, write down questions, because oftentimes, as soon as you walk into the room, I come in, I say, hey, how are you doing? What is everyone's natural response? I'm fine.
When in
And you're
reality, it's probably a
right.
long list in their head.
Long list of things, and like it just like pooped out of your head, right?
Mm.
Or maybe you had that pain and that pain isn't there. Just like going to the mechanic, we've all been to the mechanic. Oh, I swear to goodness, it was making that sound, and then you get there and it's gone,
Well,
right?
because we all experience that, and you feel
Yeah.
so silly because they're looking at you like, well,
Yeah.
that's
Write
like,
it down.
yeah,
Write down your
that is
questions,
great. That is
because that
great.
also means you get to like specifically say this question was answered, this question was answered, this question wasn't answered, right? And then you'll be surprised at where things can branch off. Now, there may be times, and this happens a lot, where a patient's main concern and a physician's concern are not the same,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it may be for a lot of different reasons, right? So something that I often come into like issues with this is that like I am concerned about something safety wise, right? I don't feel like a medication is safe to give, or I feel like the patient's kidney function isn't doing well enough to continue getting a medicine that they were getting before. But somebody really is advocating for a medication, or they are so used to taking their medication, or they have a side effect or a symptom they feel I'm not addressing, right? There is a way to bridge that communication gap, right?
Mm.
And that does take on your part as a patient some skills of listening as well. Because if you can hear what I'm saying, that like, Mrs. Jones, I'm really concerned that continuing this medication can cause you to become confused, right? Your kidneys are not doing well. If we continue giving this medication at night for sleep, I'm concerned that you're going to be very confused in the morning, and this is a big safety problem. If you can hear what I'm saying, and you as a patient can then say, okay, but I'm still not sleeping, right? I hear and I don't want to be confused in the morning. Or if to you that is an acceptable risk, right? Doc, my kidney function has been like this before and I have taken that medication. And to me is an acceptable risk. I am okay with taking this medication, right?
Great
Then
example. But there's something else that you said too that really brings home the point. All the more reason to have someone there available to advocate for you if you're unable to communicate. That's familiar with
yes,
what it is that you're
yes,
doing. It would seem like to me that one of the things that you are going to do if you know you're going into the hospital, this is not the emergency one, is if you know you're going, that you need to have some kind of conversations with your family members about some things. What kinds of things should be covered in those conversations in
yeah.
preparation for your hospital stay?
So I talk a lot about this in my book. I believe everybody really should have a lot of documentation to support them, their voice, and their choice. In fact, when I teach in the community, I call it voice your choice, right? Um, Pick a healthcare proxy. What does that mean? That means somebody in your life who is going to be able to act as if they are you. If you're unable to speak for yourself or make decisions for yourself in a healthcare setting, right? And notice I said act as if they are you, not do the thing that they think is best. Two very
Mm,
different things.
mhm,
Meaning, this is someone who you have said, A, are you comfortable being my healthcare proxy? And
mhm,
B, these are my wishes. You've had the explicit conversation.
mhm,
They understand what that means, right?
mhm.
And I see that often, particularly with adult children, some have the ability to say, this is not what I would have chosen, but mom has told me this is what she wants. Whereas others say, like, this is what I think is best for mom, right? But your healthcare proxy is supposed to be that, a proxy. They are supposed to act as if they are you, carrying out your best wishes. The next way to back that person up is by writing it down,
I was just going to ask you about that.
right?
Okay.
And that is in the advanced directive. Some people call that a living will, right? Meaning you have written down everything that you want done for you in the case you're not able to make decisions for yourself, right? And some people I've seen advanced directives that are very, very detailed. I wouldn't want dialysis. I would want dialysis, but only for this long. Intubate me, but don't trach me, all of those things. And then I've seen some that are as Spartan as ask my healthcare proxy, right? But the more information you can put in is the more that you are speaking for yourself. Think of it as that, you speaking for yourself. And then your state also has a document called a MOLST or a POST, depending on your state, mobile order of life-sustaining treatment or a portable order of life-sustaining treatment. Sometimes I've heard them called physician orders of life-sustaining treatment, medical orders of life-sustaining treatment. But if you go into POLST, post.org, it's the national organization that supports this movement. And what these documents do on a state level is they really address a lot of the things around CPR, electric shocks, medications, intubation, non-invasive ventilation, maybe dialysis, IV fluids, and you can sign that document with your healthcare provider, and that document goes in the record. So now that document is speaking for you. Here in Massachusetts, it's a hot pink form, and we tell people, put it on your refrigerator, so that when EMS comes in, because EMS doesn't have documentation, right? EMS sees that, and then they know what your wishes are in
And
the case of an
what is that
emergency.
website again? It's called what again?
Pulse, POLST.org.
POLST.org. That's really important for people to know. And that's the first time I've heard of that. And I'm 68. So I'm going to
Yeah, so
yeah.
you can click on your state, and then it will take you to the appropriate documentations. They have a map. It will take you to the appropriate documentation for your state. My state, Massachusetts, is moving to an electronic form. And what does that mean for us in the state is hopefully we'll have more access to more information, right? It's a document that has been designed really to support people with kind of like progressive illnesses, people more medically frail or more towards the end of life, But what I find that document is also a great way to have a conversation, because
Right.
these are not fun conversations. These are oftentimes uncomfortable
It's
conversations.
to facilitate what to talk about because you're right. They're not fun conversations. And in this country, we act like we're going to live forever. We don't like to talk about death or dying
Yeah.
or any of that. And so the chances of you covering everything, because we don't normally talk about it, it's not like we teach it in school. Having something like that, a document, could be very helpful. Having your book could be very helpful. When you were writing your book, what was it that you were thinking that you wanted people to walk away with?
Well, I wrote it thinking I was going to teach people. First, it started as like a COVID book. I was like, I'm going to teach people how to navigate communication in the age of COVID. And actually, when you read the book, you will not find COVID in there at all, because as you said earlier, it just exacerbated the problems we were already having. Right? People were just now having those problems in a much larger experience. And so, what I want people to do is to learn, number one, about hospitals, right? And I know that sounds really like silly. People are like, oh, it's a hospital. No, it's not a hospital. There are so many different types of hospitals that can do so many different things for people. What is in your community? I want people to learn about the hospital in their community. What does the community hospital have that you may know about, right? Do they deliver babies? You'd be surprised. Not every hospital delivers babies, right? Um, is it a stroke center? Are they able to handle heart attacks, right? Is it a trauma center?
You say, what
Learn,
PD is it? Right,
right,
exactly.
learn about the hospital in your community, right? So that when you go there, you kind of know what it can and cannot support, right? And then I want people to also learn a bit about the experience of how to navigate the days of your hospital stay, because things move quickly. Hospitalizations, they're not like they were in the 70s and 80s where you would be in the hospital for like ever and a half,
Exactly.
and you would convalesce and you get like a steak
Right.
dinner. Now it's time to go. right? Like get and what I tell people is hospitals are no longer places to get better. They're places to get your medication and your plan and move on to the next phase so you really can get better in your home or a rehab or wherever it is that's going to be able to spend some time with you, right? But that means that you have to know what it means when the nurse comes in and says, "Hey, you're NPO tonight." What does that mean and why? Right? Okay, I'm going to have a procedure. I'm not going to sneak some applesauce because they may actually cancel my surgery, and now
Mhm.
I have another day on having to wait for surgery. What is a case manager, and why should you really work with that person? To me, the case managers are the rock stars of the hospital,
They
right?
are so important. And why don't you go ahead and explain what case managers are? I used to hire case managers, so I
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I describe a case manager as a cross between a nurse and a social worker,
Mhm.
right? They are a nurse by training. So they're able to speak to me as a physician. They're able to go through your medical record. They're able to navigate your medical needs, but they have access to what's on the outside of the hospital. They know what's in the community to support you, which organizations, which skilled nursing facilities, what rehabs, what nursing homes can take care of you for what you need. And then they have access to your insurer and they can help you navigate what your insurer will pay for, will not pay for, what they will supplement. You would be surprised what they can put together. And
Mhm.
so I tell people that is the person I want you to bare your soul to. That is a person I want you to tell what you can do at home, what you need at home, what your fears are, what you don't have at home. Can they set you up with Meals on Wheels if food insecurity is really an issue for people that they don't talk about? But that could be a big reason why you're not doing well, is if you don't have enough food consistently. Tell your case managers, see what they can set you
Yeah,
up with.
we are a wealth of resources of things that are going on outside the hospital that you probably would not even know to think about. And
Yeah.
finding out who your case manager is as soon as possible is so important. If they don't volunteer the information, then you ask, because that's something that people don't normally ask. Oh, who's my case manager? And they'll get that information for you. So many of this in navigating what's going on in what I call them little cities in hospitals
Yeah.
has to do with asking questions. I tell you, one of the things I used to wonder about with hospitals, because every single hospital I ever went into when I was working in that environment, they were always so confusing to navigate, so large. Oh my God, it was like one
Yeah.
of those things that you go to that are like puzzles. I can't
Yeah.
the word, but I mean, it is so crazy just to navigate. So, one of the things I would say, and let me know if you think this is right, but to go ahead and get a map of the hospital and where things are, because you think you know, but when you're in a traumatic
Yeah.
situation or when you're just stressed out after the surgery and everything else, and all of a sudden you can't remember where did you park the car. You can't remember where is the hospital room, where is my loved one, or where's the waiting room, where's everybody else? If you,
Yeah, no, finding your way around a hospital is confusing. Finding your loved one in a hospital is
yes,
very confusing. And people really do kind of get really upset and frustrated, understandably, when they show up at the hospital and they're like, they don't even know where my mom is.
right.
And so it's not as easy as you would think because, like you said, it's a mini city. Like they may move your mother from the emergency department to radiology and then from radiology directly to a bed.
Mhm.
And oh, that bed actually, now the toilet's not working. Okay, now we have to move them there. It takes a lot of coordination to get all of that stuff done. So yeah, it's so funny when you said that. I've worked at so many hospitals, and a lot of hospitals will have somewhere in the lobby a picture of the original hospital. Like
Mhm.
my hospital currently has that. You walk in, it's like a picture of an old brick building from like 1920 something, right? And what ends up happening is they just kind of build onto those. Boom, boom, boom,
Yeah,
boom,
they
boom,
just
boom,
kind of
boom.
add
And
on.
it just gets very confusing
It gets very
versus,
confusing.
yeah,
It's,
kind of
it's kind of
kind of
funny,
like
really.
not a planned city, right? If you think about like planned cities, those are like very just like crisscross, grids. And then you go to someplace else that's not a planned city and you're like, I have no idea. Like New York City, I'm like, they just added on to that. They were like, oh, let's just keep adding on to here and here. And now I'm in Queens and I don't know how I got here, you
Right,
know? So
exactly. I don't know how I got here, and I don't know how to go back from where I came, and I don't know who to
yeah.
ask. So,
Yeah, sometimes.
if you have the opportunity to get some kind of a roadmap or something, sometimes they're online. of how everything is laid out and where your loved one might be or what area and so on and so forth. That could be very, very helpful.
And help you find your car.
Yeah, what about that? I was going to say, gone are the days of the candy stripers. I don't really see them around any longer. The laws have changed because, in terms of HIPAA and everything else. So it's not as easy to have those kind of volunteers around. Sometimes at the very front, they have people at the information desk, but they're not 24/7. So if you can find that information out before your loved one goes so that you're not going so crazy, because they're not going to be able to answer your questions. The loved ones will be, zonked out probably. That would take away a lot of frustration. Wow, Dr. Nugent, so much information. And for those of you who are looking on the actual show page right now, Prescription for Admission, The Power of Potential of Hospital Medicine, the link to that book is there on the show page, as well as a link to her website that talks even more. You've got a great blog here about some key things that people need to be thinking about when their loved one is going to the hospital, or even on an emergency standard. I'm kind of like at the point now, even though as far as I know, I'm in really good health, I really have been thinking about things that might happen that I'm not expecting and how I'm going to educate myself and prepare my loved ones. And this book right here is going to be a big help. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. This was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And also, thank you for your service. People always talk about that with military and all that. But because I know what it's like to work in a hospital, and I work so closely with doctors and nurses, thank you for your service.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
It's a lot more. People think, well, they get a lot of money, but it's really not about all of that. It really isn't. So you give so much of yourselves, whether people think that's happening or not. I don't really know too many doctors who don't ultimately have caring behind everything that they do. It just comes across a little differently. And when you're in the height of a dramatic situation with health and everything else, people have a tendency to think that the person who is the most to blame and doesn't care is the doctor. And that's not true. It's definitely not true. So thank you for your service, Dr.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for those kind words.
Absolutely welcome. And thank you to all of you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. And you know what I'm going to say, please like, subscribe, and comment and share this podcast. And take a look at the literally hundreds of other interviews that we have here on the Vibe Living podcast, all designed to help you maneuver midlife in a way that is wonderful and joyous and full of adventure. After all, I believe that if you're in midlife, it's your right to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered along that journey. Have a fantastic day, everybody. And don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Vibe Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.